Nos invités spéciaux aujourd'hui sont Ève Grébert, Johanna Funicchio, Colin Kemp et Monsieur Étienne Laliberté. And before we jump into our discussion, let's go over a few housekeeping notes before the guests launch into their presentations. Please be advised that this session will be recorded. You already know. All participants will be muted during the presentation portions. Please keep your camera off during the presentation except when speaking. That's just a bandwidth management issue. And we invite you to turn the closed caption function on for the duration of the presentation to enhance the accessibility of the material. Et maintenant, sans plus tarder, je donne la parole à nos panélistes afin qu'ils se présentent eux et leur travail. Madame Ève Grébert.
Okay, well, while that's loading, I will introduce myself quickly. Hi, folks. I am so honored and excited to be here today to talk to you about Beyond. This is an onboarding project that I'm working on the side of my desk. In my day-to-day, I'm an analyst with the Open Government team with TBS. So I will launch right into this. And just for a little bit of context, this is a presentation that I gave at Forward 50 this year as part of the G-Factor policy pitch competition. So we will get right to it. So this is Beyond, and it is an enterprise solution for an enterprise challenge. Alors, je suis ici aujourd'hui parce que nous avons un problème d'intégration dans la fonction publique canadienne. Je sais que vous vous dites, ben, on a déjà de l'intégration, on a des employés qui commencent, on fait des introductions, on intègre les gens. Et oui, c'est vrai. But here's the issue. The way that we work has changed dramatically in the last 2.5 years, but the way that we onboard and crossboard new hires hasn't. So imagine this, an innovative platform that enables users to contribute to an open and accessible common onboarding repository that employees and managers alike can use to support their individual and collective needs. It's a platform that's going to be designed to be accessible, intuitive, inclusive, and open by design. And it's also a platform that embodies the areas of focus for Beyond 2020. It's agile, it's inclusive, and it's equipped. It's an innovative solution to a long-standing problem. Les chiffres montrent l'incidence de l'intégration sur le succès des employés et l'organisation. And so we know that onboarding is really important, but I think that the numbers do a really great job of highlighting why. So I'll start with the positive. A good onboarding process has an enormous impact on retention. It actually leads to up to an 82% increase in new hire retention, and this is a study that was done by consulting firm Gallup. Employee satisfaction was also found to be 30 times higher in jobs with a great onboarding system. And this was a study that was published in Forbes. And then happy and satisfied employees are 13% more productive than their counterparts found Oxford University Business School. But on the flip side, a disengaged and unsatisfied employee costs the employer an estimated 34% of their salary. And this comes from higher rates of absenteeism and lower productivity while on the job. A negative onboarding experience also results in an employee being twice as likely to look for other opportunities within their first year of employment. And what really drives all this home is that 88% of employees don't feel that their organization onboards well. Nous parlons souvent de recrutement et de rétention, et un processus solide d'intégration est un élément vraiment essentiel pour construire une place de travail très engagée. And we didn't just kind of come to this just par hasard, you know, we've all experienced it at least once. It's your first day at a new job. Somebody comes to get you in the lobby. They give you a tour of the office. They point you to an empty desk, and then you get handed a literal stack of paper to read while you wait for your computer to arrive. Or maybe, like me, you started a new job remotely. On day one, you go to open your computer and you don't have VPN or email access. So you can't get on the network to fill out the forms that you need to fill out to get network access, and you can't get into your email without getting on the network. And so before you know it, you've lost an entire day, but more importantly, your organization and your hiring managers have also lost out on your talent. And this problem has been around a long time. And so we started talking about it, a couple months ago, and we knew that there had to be other people who had frustrations. And so this is when we found the onboarding community of practice, which some of you here today may be a part of. It's a community of members from 44 departments who share a common goal, which is to make onboarding better for everyone. And what we heard from them is that onboarding is inconsistent. There's a white glove service for executives that some departments have mirrored for employees. For example, CDS has a really comprehensive and accessible process that you can find on Google Drive. I spoke last week with a team from ESDC, actually from the Western Territories region, who have an incredible pilot project with tons of resources that they're launching. But that's very much luck of the draw. There's also no quality standard for content or process. So despite the fact that we are all public servants who work for one employer, the Government of Canada, the information that you have access to differs based on which department is onboarding you. And this actually leads to issues later on in the process when we look at cross-boarding, when employees transfer departments, because there's no common understanding as to what employees should already know. And this further contributes to skill imbalances across departments. Onboarding content is also confusing. It's full of unfriendly acronyms that leave new hires confused. How many of you came into the public service and had no idea what people were talking about for the first 6 months to a year that you were there? Or how many of you are relatively seasoned public servants who go to a new department and you are equally confused and you are like frantically looking through your intranet to find some kind of dictionary or some kind of lexicon because it just doesn't make sense? And then this kind of brings me back to the fact that there's also no common repository where there's unprotected information that's hidden behind firewalls in accessible formats for no reason. And this goes beyond what we've heard from our community of practice. We all know what people think about the Canadian public service. It's slow. You probably won't actually start on the start date that somebody tells you will, and it's normal for you to not get paid. And these things do happen. And a negative onboarding experience reinforces negative stereotypes about the public service. But we know that that's not true. And we know that there are so many parts of the public service that are brilliant. And so creating an intentional and high quality enterprise-wide onboarding platform is really an opportunity for us to course correct. With over 60,000 hires into the public service in the 2019 to 2020 year alone, fixing our onboarding process is more important than ever. And so this brings me back to Beyond. It's a web-based, accessible, and collaborative platform that supports an enterprise-wide approach to onboarding. This would be a platform that hosts content that is accessible off-network, that is open by design for partners to use, and most importantly, it evolves with the needs of an evolving public service. And so this is where we're at now with this project, is we need the support. Onboarding is a priority, and it needs to be treated like such, and this starts with senior leadership support. We're also looking for talent. It's an intact team of policy pros, UX designers, learning experts, and technical folks who want to give some time to develop a custom solution with custom content. Ideally, this project would be one that we would have the funding for and the time to make it something a reality that's bigger than just on the side of your desk, to roll it out in phases, first to the core public service, and then to all who want access. And all of this comes back to providing public servants with the tools that we need to support our evolving needs. And since Forward 50, I've been lucky to have several conversations with folks to kind of connect the dots. And so what's really popped out to me as the next steps and where this is going is really to identify, one, the business and policy requirements for this, but to also connect the people who are doing the work. And, chatbots, for example, are a really great example of something that would be really useful for this project. And I can think off the top of my head of 4 different teams who are all working on chatbots in their own departments. And so really the idea with this now moving forward is to connect those dots and to connect the initiatives and see how we can spread them wider, and ultimately how we can make it something that is accessible, that is public facing, and really takes the best of what we have to offer to put it all together. So if you'd like to chat more with us, you can follow me on Twitter, send me a quick message, and I would love to connect with you further about this. But that is it from me. Thank you so much, folks, for having me.
Merci, Eve. Percutant. I love it. It's the dream. It's what we should strive for. Totally agree. I want to see this happen. Looking forward to participants, your questions. If you have any for Eve, please drop in Slido chat. And next we have Joanna.
Hi, and good afternoon, and I'm so excited to be here. Thanks again for the invite. I will be fiddling with buttons myself to share my screen, and while I do that, I'm going to introduce myself as well. So my name is Joanna Finikiu. I currently, in my day job, work for the Treasury Board Secretariat on the Open Government team with Ev, and let's see here. And also, I pitched this idea about transferable employee data during the Forward 50 G Factor pitch on November 5th. So here's a pattern for you. One, come work for OpenGov at TBS. We do really cool things with cool people. And two, get involved with Forward 50 and their fabulous ideas. It comes around once a year, and that's definitely something to be part of. So I think you can all see my screen now. Je vais faire la présentation en anglais, mais soyez bien à l'aise de me poser des questions en français ou en anglais, comme vous voulez. Donc, on y va. I will take you today just on a quick tour of this idea that I've had for a couple of years. So I want to welcome you all to my TED Talk. And today's TED Talk is about transferable employee data to improve employee mobility in the federal public service. So the Government of Canada as an employer is a massive organization. Currently, there are 206 departments, agencies, crown corporations, and special operating agencies. So before we start zooming out, let's zoom in a little bit on a typical employee experience. So let's take Jackie as an example. She has worked for 5 federal departments throughout her career so far. And when she started working with the Government of Canada, she needed to prove her education credentials, language test results, security clearance, and mandatory training, among other things. These things might be familiar. So when she started working for Department A at the very beginning of her career, Jackie provided physical proof of her education credentials to her first department, Department A. And while she was there, she undertook language testing from Department X, got her security clearance that was issued by Department Y, and took some mandatory training with Department Z. And all of these things were stored in a database in Department A. So 3 years later, Jackie decides to move from Department A to Department B. Now, what does not follow Jackie to Department B is her credentials. They're simply not transferred from Department A to Department B, which leaves Jackie to figure out how exactly to move her own credentials. So now she's got to go to her basement, dig through a box, because now her credentials, they've moved houses, they're in a box in the basement. She's got to dig it out, present proof again, even though she presented it to Department A already. So now her language testing, security clearance, mandatory training, and proof of education, all these credentials that she was already issued, there's copies of them now stored in the database of Department B. 2 years later, Jackie moves from Department B to Department C. Now, what doesn't follow Jackie around? Well, her credentials do not get transferred to Department C, which means that Jackie has to provide her credentials yet again. So here we go 6 years later, and so on and so on. You can see sort of where this is going. You might have lived it. Now imagine that the Government of Canada as an employer, zooming back out here again, has 300,000 people in departments, agencies, crown corporations, and special operating agencies. Now, how many databases is that exactly? Probably more than 206. None of these databases talk to each other. However, the data that each department collects or needs for an employee is typically the same. We started talking about it earlier. We're talking about language testing, security clearance, mandatory training, proof of education. I call this transferable employee data, or TED. Now, I want us to imagine a slightly different future or way forward. What if, to mainstream mobility in the Government of Canada, we created and relied on a set of verifiable credentials that are issued by the relevant institution, that are owned by the individual, and that are accepted by every institution. Now, that is the Government of Canada as an employer that I want to imagine. I want to say this again and let it sink with you for a minute. In order to mainstream mobility in the Government of Canada as an employer, let's use a set of verifiable credentials issued by the relevant institution, owned by the individual they belong to, and accepted by every institution. Why do we want to do this? Well, there's a few things. One database to rule them all does not exist, nor should it exist, really. We know that information does not flow freely between departments and databases. We also know that data about an individual really belongs to that individual. and we want to future-proof the government of Canada as an employer. Why do we want to do this now? Well, it's simple. Technology has finally caught up. We're talking about distributed ledgers. We're talking about things that are now in the realm of the feasible, not just the art of the possible. This is going to save money. This is going to save time and make us more efficient and keep the government in Canada attractive as an employer. So now what? What do we do now exactly? First thing, we need to have a coalition of the willing. We need to leverage existing work. Again, this is already starting to happen in different areas. We're talking about user-centric digital credentials challenge that ISED ran a couple of years ago. The Canada School of Public Service is already working with open badges. And we definitely need to map out business and policy requirements to make this happen. So again, I want to leave you with some examples of current colleagues who are talking about this, who want a transferable employee data to become a thing, even if it didn't have a name. And the former clerk of the Privy Council also said something pretty powerful about a month ago in an article that I encourage you all to read. And this is the quote that really stuck with me, because we really want to deal with some of the deep structural issues in the public service. And I really do believe that future-proofing the government of Canada is done through a set of verifiable credentials issued by the relevant institution, owned by the individual, and accepted by every institution. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk today. Happy to answer any questions.
Merci beaucoup, Joanna. I think that now I just realized that our talks should come with like trigger warnings, because so many of us have probably gone through a lot of the same stuff. How many times do we have to present these pieces of cardboards every freaking time? Every time I roll my eyes. I'm like, really? Really? 15 years in the federal public service. Anyways, thank you so much. Participants, if you have any questions, please drop them in the Slido to chat and raise your hand. For our next presenter, Mr. Colin Kemp, we're ready for you, sir.
Thank you. Let me just see if I can share my screen. Please, someone give me a thumbs up. I'm going to share it now. Give me one second. Window. Uh-oh. Can you see it?
Yeah, all good.
Okay. Okay. Technology. Okay, so thank you everyone for inviting me to speak today. I am very happy to talk about some things I did while working at Treasury Board, but this is not officially a Treasury Board presentation. I'll explain that in a second. So basically, my name is Colin Kemp. I'm a currently defense scientist at the Department of National Defense, and I did a one-year secondment at the Treasury Board. And I did some work. I do a lot of work right now with artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning, and so forth. But first off, just a quick disclaimer. As you can see, so today I am representing myself, neither D&D nor TBS. And the reason is because I currently work at D&D, but I didn't do this work at D&D. I worked at TBS previously, and just getting permissions and everything else, it's just a kind of a big mess. So I'm just going to show this stuff just from my own point of view. And I didn't know they were recording, so thank goodness I have a disclaimer. So I say, Kia wa, Ronin desu. So today I am a Ronin, which is kind of a samurai without a master. I'm a digital samurai. Here's my favorite Ronin, Miyamoto Musashi. I lived in Japan and I worked in Japan for a year. So I'm a big fan of Japanese samurais, including Musashi. Very interesting character. Fought 60 battles, never lost once. Was a samurai without a master, a Ronin. So I'm a digital Ronin. I don't fight with swords. Today I use my mouse and keyboard. So, all right, so into it. Natural language processing. So today I'm going to talk about two applications I developed using natural language processing. And moreover, I was asked to speak here because the topic was more or less HR data that exists. And the nice thing about these two applications or these two projects was that I did not have to go collect data that didn't already exist, that wasn't already available to me. So that made it a lot easier. At D&D, I run studies and I have to collect data, and that can take ages. So this was fantastic. So what is natural language processing? Well, basically, it's a subfield of computer science and artificial intelligence that is concerned with processing and analyzing natural languages such as English and French. So NLP can be used to understand and generate natural language. You've seen this, everybody has encountered it, whether you probably realize this, but if you've ever encountered autocomplete in Gmail, for example, or spelling, grammar, style analysis, text summarization is a big application now. You might not realize this, but even some news articles are now being written by AIs. They're not, especially in domains such as sports news, and anything that's just very factual based. AIs are able to write this. Knowledge extraction from text, document classification, and I did some of this at TBS. And I think Ev mentioned chatbots. Chatbots is a very nice application of generative models for AI. So methods include things like latent semantic analysis and word vector methods based on deep learning. And I'm gonna show examples of both today from work that I did. There's a famous saying, 1957, J.R. Firth, "You shall know a word by the company it keeps." And what that means is that we don't really know words by themselves. We could say the word seal as in SEAL, and it could be, we could say seal, we could mean like an animal, or we can mean like a wax seal, the kind I stamp my letters with. But we know it from the context, especially if the word is the spelling is the same, but it has a different meaning. But to understand a word, we really have to look at it in the context of the words that surround it. And that's basically what natural language processing does. It's effectively just very, very, very fancy and very powerful statistical processing that processes words in relation to other words to understand the meanings of those words. And we'll get into this in a little bit, but it goes beyond keywords. And that's the strength of modern natural language processing. It goes into the semantic level in terms of the meaning by basically understanding the word by the company it keeps in larger documents. So just quickly, some tools. I'm not going to get into the technical details. I don't have that much time for that. But if anyone wants to talk later, I'm happy to discuss in detail. I use Python. It's a programming language. Pandas, which is an add-on to Python for data science. It's very convenient to do to analyze big data sets with pandas and operate on them. NLTK, that's a natural language toolkit. Scikit-learn, that's a machine learning library for Python. And Spacey, I love Spacey. It's really easy to use. It's an API. They call it industrial strength natural language processing, and it's for application. So you can quickly plug your things into Spacey, and it uses cutting edge models. They've just updated it to use a very cutting edge Roberta, which is a transformer model. So if you're interested in playing around with it, you need to know a little Python. You can start playing around with Spacey. So check it out on the web. So what did I do? I collected some data. I had a personnel data set with 325,000 cases. Now that's the entire public service. These are all of the single positions in the public service, whether they're open or they are vacant. And if everyone, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the National Occupation Code or Classification Code, that's a typo. It should say National Occupation Classification Code, website data. The NOC is a Canadian initiative to basically classify jobs. There's over, I think, 1,000 classification codes. Now, the point here is that government jobs, every position in the government, including your position, should have an associated NOC code. So one of 1,000 or something, I'm not exactly sure how many there are, but it's around 1,000. So I did an analysis of all 325,000 cases using pandas, and I quickly determined that 280 separate NOCs with more than 10 cases are represented. So the public service is basically represented by 280 NOC codes in this database. Now, every job is supposed to be assigned a NOC, but it's problematic, and I'll get into that. So what I did was I quickly looked at the NOCs, and I determined that there was about 3,000 duties across the NOCs. So an example NOC code is NOC 1251. That's court reporters, medical transcriptionists, and related occupations. And you can see what some duties. So I was concerned primarily with the duties to keep this simple. So in this case, proofreading, editing, recording, dictation, and so forth. That's one example. So my first example is a job duty visualizer. My goal, identify and cluster duties relevant to all government jobs. Visualize these clusters. So I took the 280 NOCs that are represented in the government, and basically I extracted them from PCIs Plus, and I extracted the duties from the Canadian government's NOC webpage, which is available online. And then I did some natural language processing. Because we're short on time, I won't get into this, but I transformed them using natural language, which is TF, IDF, vectors. These are ways to basically turn words into numbers so we can represent them and process them with a computer, because computers don't process words, they process numbers. So once that was in there, I reduced the dimensionality using latent semantic analysis. Quick aside, if you studied linear algebra, Latent semantic analysis is what's called singular value decomposition in linear algebra, or if you've studied psychology, you might have heard of principal components analysis. These are all the same things mathematically. They are just different uses. It's a very powerful kind of algorithm for many use cases. But this is kind of last generation, but I'll show you. So what I did was once I took those, I determined the optimal number of clusters and transformed the data and visualized them. So keep in mind, I'm just curious at this point. This wasn't really for work, but I just wanted to see if I can summarize all duties across the existing government jobs, what would that summary look like if I visualized it? So that's what I'm just trying to do, cluster them into something that I can visualize. So this is just some more technical details, tokenization and so forth. It's not really relevant. Again, if you're interested, I'm happy to talk about this in depth. It's just natural language processing gets quite technical, and even this is glossing over it. But basically, this is transforming it into a format that a computer can understand and start doing singular value decomposition or factor analysis or principal components analysis, I should say, on. So here's just a little bit of mathematics for this, again, for the interested. But basically what I want to do is, basically the point is, let's eliminate the noise from all these and retain the signal. What's the essence of all these duties, and how can we cluster them? That's really what we're doing here. We're taking all of these different things and we're seeing what do they share? What do they share in common? And how can we cluster these into groups of common things, common items? So this is it's an art, and it's a science, but it's also an art. So I run it through an empirical method to determine the number of clusters. That's how I got 30. And again, this is just a method of the computer going through steps and checking fit until I can determine the computer suggesting here 30 different clusters of job duties across all the government. And this is just another way to visualize it. The clusters should be on the right of the red line, but it's impossible. You always get clusters on the left. The ones on the left they don't fit really well. They don't fit really well. They're kind of extraneous factors, but you can play with the numbers of factors. You can't really get this perfect in the real world. This is pretty good. So what I did was then I just visualized them with word clouds. So as you can see really quickly, I have different clusters: conduct research, perform studies, analyses, that's one, or operate equipment and maintain, load heavy materials, trucks. You can tell this is physical stuff, or cleaning equipment and so forth. So basically all the jobs in the government, according to this analysis, can be clustered into about 30 clusters of duties. So I'm mindful of my time. I have 5 minutes. So here, it's pretty neat. It's a way to kind of reduce all of that information into 30 clusters that I can visualize with word clouds. Example 2. So I took this data and I wanted to create a recommender for the NOC codes. The reason was because in the PCIS data, NOC codes were not being allocated. They were either empty or they were the wrong NOC code for the job. I feel that maybe whoever's entering this data at the departmental level will just put the NOC code they know, or just leave it blank. And that's a problem. And I thought, well, there's 1,000 or whatever NOC codes. It's difficult. People are lazy, or they're not going to look it up. They'll just leave it blank or put the NOC code they know. What if there's a new job that doesn't exist? What's the NOC code? So I decided I'm going to use a natural language processor to recommend a NOC code. So I extracted all of the duties from the NOC and of the jobs, and I used a deep learning neural network in Spacey to basically I can type in natural language what the duties of a job, and it will suggest a NOC, and it will suggest them in the order of relevance, is basically what it comes down to. And this uses deep learning and word vector methods, which is very cutting edge artificial intelligence. There's some math. Just the take-home message here is each word. It's not keyword search, because each word is basically represented by a 300-dimensional vector. So you can think of any word, say dog. It has 300 dimensions that kind of describe the word in relation to other words. So you can get at a very deep semantic comparison. Like a dog and a wolf, for example, will not be the same vector, but they'll be similar because they share a lot of overlap. And I can compare these mathematically. That's the similarity coefficient. That's called cosine similarity. It's used a lot in machine learning. And this way I can numerically compare concepts, terms, documents, anything, any kind of language, and get an actual number that tells me how similar they are, even if their words are completely different. So I created it. Let's try it. Here's 3 examples. I typed it in: organize files, make photocopies, answer telephone calls, book meetings. Why not? And based on this, the machine learning recommended 5 NOCs, and they are titles: general office workers, administrative assistants, receptionists, correspondent. So it looks like it's working pretty well. But you could say, well, this is just a keyword search because these things probably show up in the keyword. So my friend said, well, how about peruse, ponder, and muse? Well, these are not in the NOC database. These words do not exist. I guarantee they don't exist in the database of NOC, and yet it knows somehow magically, because of these 300 dimensions and all of the semantic associations, that painters, authors, writers, theater, fashion, landscape architects, these are creative professions. You see how interesting that is? And we can go even weirder. Feed and care for walrus, penguins, and llamas. And these definitely don't show up in the NOC. Again, walrus, penguins, llamas, they don't. But it actually was pretty good. It still was able to recommend pet groomers and animal care workers, general farm workers, trappers and hunters. I don't know, it's not perfect, but well, you could, aquaculture and marine harvest laborers and veterinarians. So the key thing is, it feels like almost magical, but really it's relying on deep learning and pre-trained word vectors that incorporate data sets of a gigabyte or more, huge numbers of articles. So that's how it works. So this is very, very interesting if you have any textual data that you would like to analyze. And let's see, it's like I got 1 minute. My conclusions here. So I looked at about 3,000 duties, pretty much from the NOC, across 280 NOC codes. I aggregated those into 30 clusters to visualize what public service workers do. And I used word clouds to visualize it. Then I created a search function that uses natural language search to recommend a NOC. And again, I think this is very useful because, as I said, practically speaking, NOC codes are very, very poorly allocated. They're just wrong, or they're not even allocated. So I think part of the reason is simply because who wants to go through this big taxonomy of NOC codes to find the NOC for your new job? And like I said, if a brand new job is invented today and it has to fit a NOC, my search engine will find it. They'll find the closest thing anyway. And the nice thing is, these are just two of many, many possible NLP applications for existing HR data. Again, I didn't collect this data. I just scraped it off of the NOC webpage, and I took an existing internal Treasury Board data set for this. And note that, as we saw a little bit with the empirical determination, 30 clusters, could be 20 clusters, could be 40. I mean, it's really both an art and a science. There are empirical methods, but there's a lot of judgment involved. So anybody who comes and says, we'll solve all your problems with AI or natural language processing, be very skeptical, because there is a lot of art, science, and subject matter expertise is very, very important for the domain. You can't just hire a consultant off the street who doesn't know anything about HR and have them throw a bunch of stuff into the engine and have it work. And that is it. I'm out of time. So happy to answer any questions. Sorry about the rush, but this stuff is, I really love this stuff. It's extremely, extremely interesting. And I think in terms of HR, if you think I have text data, I don't know what to do with it. I have a lot of qualitative data. Think natural language processing, and there's very probably an application for you. Thank you.
Wonderful, Mr. Kemp. Thank you so much for your time. Very well presented. Lots to think about. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Et notre dernier présentateur, M. Étienne Laliberté. I hope you have a timer, because like Colin set the tone.
I think I have to are you still seeing my screen here? I'm going to try and unshare it.
Nope, Étienne took over.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Alors, bonjour tout le monde. Moi, Étienne Laliberté, actuellement et encore pour quelques semaines avec l'équipe d'innovation en RH à EDSC. Avant de débuter, je tiens à vous dire que les idées et opinions que je vais présenter aujourd'hui sont les miennes et que je ne suis pas un porte-parole officiel de mon organisation. Mon pitch est peut-être le moins séduisant que vous allez entendre aujourd'hui. Ce que je propose, c'est tout simplement d'utiliser les données pour rendre la dotation et le recrutement plus efficientes. Mes diapos sont en anglais, mais je vais faire la narration en français. Si ça vous convient, sans plus tarder, j'aimerais tout d'abord mentionner que j'ai travaillé sur la mise en œuvre de la loi sur l'emploi dans la fonction publique en 2005, puis j'ai commencé à faire de la dotation dès 2006. Et s'il y a une chose que je peux vous dire au sujet de la dotation, c'est que certains mythes sont encore très tenaces 15 ans plus tard. Et j'aimerais aujourd'hui en challenger 3 en particulier. Le premier, c'est que le mythe que nous devons adopter des stratégies de gestion de volume pour faire face au nombre effarant d'applications que nous recevons. Le deuxième, c'est l'affirmation que j'entends peut-être le plus souvent prononcée par les spécialistes en dotation, soit que nous avons besoin de meilleurs outils de dotation. Et finalement, quelque chose que j'ai entendu répéter plusieurs fois, plus souvent en fait que je peux m'en souvenir, c'est que nous avons besoin de plus de ressources en RH. Et je me proposerais de recadrer ces trois mythes-là légèrement différemment. Tout d'abord, on n'a pas vraiment besoin de stratégie de gestion de volume. Ce que nous devons vraiment faire en premier, c'est gérer le volume de travail qui apporte peu ou pas de valeur ajoutée. Par exemple, lorsqu'on réévalue un candidat qui a déjà appliqué sur un processus de sélection pour un poste identique ou similaire et pour lequel les qualifications essentielles sont sensiblement les mêmes, on n'ajoute pas beaucoup de valeur parce que le travail a en bonne partie déjà été fait auparavant. Deuxièmement, nous avons besoin de meilleurs outils d'évaluation. En soi, ce n'est pas faux, mais ça ne devrait pas être la première question à poser. La première question à poser, ça devrait être quelles sont les qualifications essentielles qui importent vraiment pour le poste, celles qui font vraiment une différence dans la performance. Et lorsqu'on aura une clarté par rapport à ces qualifications-là, ensuite se pencher sur les outils d'évaluation. Sinon, on risque de trouver d'excellents outils d'évaluation qui évaluent les mauvaises qualifications, donc ça ne nous avance pas beaucoup. Et finalement, je n'irai pas jusqu'à dire que nous avons besoin de plus, que nous n'avons pas besoin de plus de ressources, mais je suis d'avis que nous devons devenir plus intelligents et plus judicieux dans notre utilisation des données en RH et allouer les ressources différemment en conséquence. Bref, pour ces raisons et plusieurs autres encore, je crois que nous ne sommes vraiment pas aussi efficaces que nous pourrions l'être en dotation et en recrutement. Et aussi, donc, on a deux problèmes que j'aimerais adresser aujourd'hui. Le premier, un peu plus général, c'est que nous utilisons les données de façon sous-optimale, et je suis très poli en utilisant le mot sous-optimal. Le second, plus ciblé, c'est que nous gaspillons énormément de temps, d'efforts et d'argent à évaluer des applications dites redondantes. Qu'est-ce que j'entends par application redondante? Bien, selon la Commission de la fonction publique, on considère qu'un candidat a soumis une application redondante lorsqu'il ou elle a appliqué sur un processus avec la même classification dans une période spécifiée. Cette définition ne tient pas compte du titre du poste ou des responsabilités, ni des qualifications essentielles contenues dans l'énoncé de critères de mérite. Mais ça offre quand même un point de départ intéressant. Deux occasions se présentent à nous pour être plus efficace et efficient. De façon générale, on pourrait utiliser les données existantes pour guider les améliorations aux produits et services en RH. Et de façon plus spécifique, nous pouvons réduire le travail qui consiste à évaluer les applications dites redondantes. C'est ce que je propose de faire dans mon pitch aujourd'hui. Et pour ce faire, je suggère que 7 groupes et niveaux sont peut-être la clé nous permettant de réaliser des gains d'efficience importants et rapidement, soit les CR3, 4, 5, AS1, 2 et PM1, 2. Seulement 7 groupes et niveaux parmi les 75 qu'on retrouve dans un grand ministère de 37 000 employés comme EDC. Mais pourquoi ces 7 groupes et niveaux en particulier? Tout d'abord parce qu'ils couvrent un ensemble de postes qui partagent plusieurs points en commun. Il s'agit de postes qui présentent un niveau de complexité moindre, avec des tâches bien définies et souvent même mesurables, et qui requièrent des habiletés et des qualifications plus générales, moins spécialisées. D'ailleurs, le fait que nous sommes en train de convertir ces groupes et niveaux en une seule classification, le groupe PA, n'est pas accidentel. Ces 7 groupes et niveaux représentent plus de la moitié des employés dans EDSC dans des postes substantifs. Ils représentent également le tiers des occasions d'emploi sur emploi.gc.ca affichées par EDSC. Ils représentent 2 tiers de toutes les nominations indéterminées et à terme effectuées à EDSC dans les 3 dernières années. Mais le plus important, c'est qu'ils représentent 80% du volume d'applications reçues par EDSC pour ces processus annoncés internes et externes depuis 3 ans. 80%. Donc, si on solutionne notre problème d'application redondante pour ces 7 groupes et niveaux, on résout possiblement la majeure partie de notre problème. On est donc en droit de se demander, est-ce que les applications redondantes pour ces 7 groupes et niveaux sont problématiques? Alors, une analyse de données que j'ai faite, c'est que j'ai regardé dans la redondance qu'on trouve pour ces niveaux-là. Et dans une période de 3 ans, soit du 1er avril 2018 au 31 mars 2021, on a découvert qu'un candidat sur 3 à un processus de sélection au niveau CR3, 4, 5, AS1, 2 ou PM1, 2 avait appliqué sur plus d'un processus pour ces mêmes groupes et niveaux. Et qu'en moyenne, les candidats appliquaient 3 fois, plus de 3 fois en fait. Donc, comme vous pouvez le voir sur le graphique à droite, 41% des applications, donc la partie supérieure du graphique, 41% des applications étaient des applications soumises par des candidats que nous évaluons pour la 2e, 3e, 4e fois ou encore plus, alors que nous les avions déjà évalués pour un groupe et niveau identique ou comparable. Donc, on parle de 140 000 applications sur une période de 3 ans ou en moyenne 47 000 applications par année. Mise en perspective à l'échelle complète du ministère, la moitié des applications reçues sont des applications redondantes au niveau CR3, 4, 5, AS1, 2 et PM1, 2. Et le tiers génère probablement du travail d'évaluation répété. C'est-à-dire que nous réévaluons peut-être les mêmes qualifications ou des qualifications similaires alors que le travail a déjà été fait une première fois. La prochaine question, c'est de savoir, est-ce que les qualifications sont effectivement semblables ou identiques ou on parle de trucs complètement différents? Donc, mon équipe a extrait toutes les qualifications essentielles de 79 affichages de postes au niveau CR345, AS12 et PM12 tenus par EDSC durant l'année fiscale 2020-2021 et on a dénombré un total de 165 qualifications différentes. Parmi ces 165 qualifications-là, 110 étaient utilisées une seule fois. 14 étaient utilisées seulement 2 fois en 79 affichages et 41 étaient utilisées 3 fois ou plus. Mais quand on regarde chaque qualification une par une, on remarque que même si la formulation était différente, il était clair que plusieurs qualifications visaient en fait la même habileté. Par exemple, si je pense à, je vais le dire en anglais, mais ability to communicate orally, ability to communicate effectively orally, ability to effective oral communication, communicate effectively and professionally in a team environment and with the public. On s'entend-tu que pour un PM1, on parle toutes de la même qualification, même si la formulation est légèrement différente? Je voudrais savoir, OK, oui, il y a quelqu'un qui avait un problème avec les diapos. Je suis content de voir que ça semble être résolu. Parfait, donc je reviens en arrière, mes excuses. Donc, en regardant les qualifications, j'ai fait des regroupements logiques. Donc, qui étaient similaires, je les ai regroupés. Et en bout de ligne, ce que j'ai réalisé, c'est qu'il y a 140 de ces qualifications-là qu'on pourrait réduire à essentiellement 18. Et voici ce que ces 18 qualifications auraient l'air. Et leur fréquence, la fréquence à laquelle on les trouverait sur les 79 affichages. Donc, ça offre c'est pas une solution parfaite et c'est rien d'aussi évolué que l'outil que Colin nous a montré il y a quelques minutes, mais ça nous permet de voir qu'il y aurait matière à simplifier de beaucoup les qualifications utilisées et peut-être même standardiser le langage utilisé sur ces affichages-là. On pourrait, parce que ces 18 ou 19 qualifications-là représentent 83% de toutes les qualifications qu'on a trouvées sur les affichages pour ces 7 groupes et niveaux-là en 2020-2021. Donc, la prochaine question est, si on pouvait identifier les applications redondantes et réduire ou standardiser les qualifications essentielles utilisées, quel serait l'impact pour notre ministère? Qu'est-ce que ça nous rapporterait? Alors, c'est une question à laquelle je tenais à répondre. Basé sur un set de données qui m'a été fourni par une collègue qui travaille sur un programme bien particulier dans une région bien particulière du pays et une région où on représente, où on trouve environ 5% de tout le volume d'applications pour les CR345, AS12 et PM12. On a été capable de déterminer qu'en moyenne, on passe 92 minutes d'évaluation des qualifications pour chaque application requise. Ça, c'est une moyenne. Pour certaines applications, ça va être 10 minutes qui vont être complétées après l'étape du screening. Pour d'autres candidats qui passent à travers toutes les étapes du processus, ça va représenter 3 heures et demie de travail. Mais en moyenne, on peut dire que chaque application égale 92 minutes de travail. Donc, si on suppose que le travail est fait par des PE1 ou PE2 ou PE3, donc on va aller dans cette fourchette-là, on est capable d'associer un coût à l'effort d'évaluation des qualifications. Et ce coût-là, ça représente 6,4 à 10 millions de dollars pour évaluer les 143 000 applications qu'on reçoit à EDC en moyenne dans une année, 5 millions à 8 millions pour évaluer les 114 000 applications qu'on reçoit seulement pour les CR3, 4, 5, AS12, PM12, et quelque part entre 2,1 et 3,3 millions pour évaluer les 47 000 applications redondantes qu'on reçoit pour les CR3, 4, 5, AS1, PM1 et AS2. Donc, du travail qui a possiblement déjà été fait, 2 à 3 millions de dollars pour du travail qui est possiblement déjà fait. Donc, tout ça, c'est basé sur des hypothèses et c'est intéressant de regarder au-delà de l'argent, on parle de combien de personnes que ça prend pour faire ce travail-là. Encore une fois, en se basant sur quelques scénarios, en supposant que le travail est fait par des PE1, PE2, PE3, on peut déterminer que, par exemple, si vous regardez sur la ligne d'en bas, le nombre de personnes requises pour évaluer les applications redondantes va varier à quelque part probablement entre 38 personnes et 58 personnes, selon qu'on embauche quelqu'un qui est capable de travailler 250 jours par année puis qui est 100% productif dans 100% de son temps, par exemple un employé occasionnel, ou quelqu'un qui va être un employé indéterminé, un employé à terme, qui a le droit à des vacances et qui a peut-être 75% de son temps qu'il peut allouer à cette activité-là. Donc, 38 à 58 personnes dans le ministère qui ne font qu'évaluer du travail qui a possiblement déjà été fait. Ce n'est pas une utilisation très judicieuse de l'argent des contribuables. Mais qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire avec ça? J'aimerais m'aventurer trop loin dans les solutions trop ambitieuses, mais je peux suggérer 4 propositions qui peuvent être mises en œuvre dès janvier 2022, si on le veut. Tout d'abord, commencer à suivre la trace de l'effort et des coûts allant dans la dotation et le recrutement. Au minimum, essayer de valider les estimés basés sur les données régionales que j'ai recueillies dans un seul programme et de voir si la situation est semblable pour l'ensemble du ministère. Et en passant, on l'a fait suivre les efforts et les coûts pour un processus en particulier, et ça ne demande pas beaucoup de travail supplémentaire. On parle peut-être d'une demi-journée de travail pour un processus ayant reçu 200 candidats. Donc, le gain en connaissance est quand même appréciable. Deuxièmement, la deuxième étape, ce serait de réduire le nombre de qualifications essentielles et standardiser leur formulation. Et à cet effet, plusieurs approches pourraient être considérées. Je ne rentrerai pas dans les détails aujourd'hui, mais ça me ferait plaisir d'en discuter en privé. Troisièmement, commencer à capturer, collecter les données en dotation et recrutement et maintenir des dossiers sur les candidats afin de pouvoir réutiliser ces données-là dans d'autres processus. Un minimum, suivre la trace du groupe et niveau sur lequel les candidats ont appliqué, les qualifications évaluées et les résultats d'évaluation. Et finalement, peut-être l'idée la plus ambitieuse ici, c'est de développer des avis de consentement pour les candidats afin d'optimiser l'utilisation des données qu'ils fournissent lorsqu'ils appliquent sur un concours, que ce soit à des fins de recherche, que ce soit à des fins de data mining, que ce soit à des fins de réutiliser leurs données pour prendre des décisions autres que la nomination sur le concours auquel ils ont appliqué. Donc, je pourrais pousser ma réflexion beaucoup plus loin avec des suggestions à moyen et à long terme, mais ça serait futile parce que si on n'a pas d'abord un consensus sur la nécessité de poser les 4 petits gestes que je viens d'énumérer ici. Par exemple, on pourrait facilement justifier un plan d'action beaucoup plus ambitieux visant à améliorer l'expérience candidat ou la satisfaction des gestionnaires d'embauche, améliorer le modèle de prestation de services en RH ou même préparer l'avenir en testant et comparant des outils d'évaluation modernes, planifier les investissements en technologie RH, mais tout ça, c'est intimidant et c'est parfois un peu paralysant. Donc, commençons par des petites choses. En somme, mon but ici, avec ce pitch-là aujourd'hui, c'était tout simplement de démontrer comment on peut faire un usage de données en RH. Puis je parle d'usage de données qu'on a déjà en notre possession afin de guider nos interventions. Deuxièmement, j'espère que ça va aider à rehausser le niveau du discours en se basant sur des données probantes. Un de mes buts avoués en RH, en force publique, je vais le dire en anglais, mais remove guesswork and gut feelings from HR decisions. Et finalement, j'espère démontrer que l'impact qu'on peut avoir en démocratisant l'accès aux données RH afin d'améliorer notre compréhension de ce qui se cache derrière les données. Donc, en partageant de ce qu'on appellerait des data insights afin de plus faciliter le changement et les changements de mentalité et de comportement en particulier. S'il reste un bref moment, j'aimerais présenter quelques petites bonus insights des données que j'ai examinées. Ça va peut-être intéresser les gens qui font de la dotation, mais un des sets de données que j'ai regardé, c'était par exemple combien d'applicants se maintiennent à travers un processus de dotation. Et vous avez possiblement déjà vu des graphiques comme celui-ci où on voit le taux d'attrition du nombre de candidats à chaque étape d'un processus, ou vous avez peut-être déjà aussi vu un graphique comme celui à droite où on montre le taux de réussite à chaque étape du processus. Mais ce que ces genres de graphiques-là ne révèlent pas, c'est le nombre de candidats qui abandonnent en cours de route et qui se désistent du concours ou qui cessent tout simplement de retourner les courriels et les appels. Et ce chiffre-là est possiblement aussi gros que 30% des candidats qui abandonnent en cours de route. C'est énorme. Et c'est aussi énorme quand on considère que dans bien des cas, il y a du temps qui a déjà été investi dans l'évaluation de plusieurs qualifications. Donc, peut-être 13% de tout l'effort dans un processus de dotation va à évaluer des qualifications pour des candidats qui abandonnent avant la fin. Et si on met un chiffre à ça, ça pourrait représenter jusqu'à 1 million de dollars par année qu'on dépense pour évaluer des candidats qui abandonnent en cours de route. Une autre donnée vraiment intéressante qu'on a découvert en faisant l'analyse, c'est la corrélation entre le taux d'acceptation des offres d'emploi et la durée de temps que ça prend entre la fin d'un affichage et l'émission de la lettre d'offre. Et ce qu'on a observé, sans surprise, c'est que plus ça prend du temps à émettre une lettre d'offre, plus le taux d'acceptation des offres d'emploi diminue. Ce que vous voyez ici, c'est par chaque incrément de 100 jours, le nombre d'offres d'emploi qui ont été acceptées en orange pâle et le nombre d'offres d'emploi qui ont été refusées en orange foncé. Et vous voyez que progressivement, on passe de 94 de taux d'acceptation à 81 à 70 à 20. Donc, à un moment donné, ça ne vaut même plus la peine de faire du travail d'évaluation si ça prend trop de temps à compléter le processus parce que le retour sur l'investissement est presque nul. Et finalement, le dernier data insight que j'aimerais partager avec vous, c'est je reviens sur la redondance en dotation pour les postes de CR3, 4, 5, AS1, 2 et PM1, 2. Ce que j'ai présenté, qui était la réalité à EDSC, ne représente en fait que 27 du même problème à l'échelle de la fonction publique. Donc, si les ministères se mettaient ensemble et collaboraient pour la dotation des postes d'entrée comme les CR3, 4, 5, AS1, 2, PM1, 2 et qu'on utilisait des qualifications semblables, on pourrait générer des économies faramineuses d'argent de l'ordre de 8 à 12 millions de dollars possiblement à l'échelle de la fonction publique. C'est ambitieux, mais je voulais juste partager avec vous ce qu'on peut découvrir quand on regarde juste les données qu'on a déjà en notre possession. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Étienne. Super intéressant. Tu nous laisses une liste de devoirs. Donc, on va voir qu'est-ce qu'on va pouvoir faire, qu'est-ce qu'on va ne pas pouvoir faire dans la prochaine année. Panelists, I will ask you to turn your cameras back on for a few minutes because we have time for a few questions. I think a good one, because a lot of you mentioned you were doing this on the side of your desk and you know, there's no official tasking or whatever. So what motivates you? What made you, did you get up at night and you were like, we have a problem and I must find a solution? Like what triggered that in you? Colin, I'll go with you first.
Oh, sure. Well, I feel, well, my philosophy is I don't want to rest on my laurels. So I try to learn, you know, what cutting edge things in mathematics and computer science. And I find that, you know, it's one thing to take a course, but it's another, and you can take a course and you'll often forget it. Or you can read a textbook, but you'll forget it. But the best way to learn something is to find a real problem in the real world, apply it, and find a solution. So that's part of it. I just like, I think it's, you know, applying what I know, what I've learned to a real world problem is key. And also I feel like it's just that there's so many avenues to improve the public service, right? Using things like this. And I know really quickly, Ev mentioned having employee information in one place that goes through with them to them through the career. And I went to Estonia last year and I thought, oh wow, you know, they're light years ahead of us, what the Estonians are doing with blockchain and all the records on the blockchain and what like that and whatnot. I think it's just, I really want to improve the public service. People say, you know, the taxpayer, the public servant doesn't do anything there, you know, but no, I think that we can actually deliver value to the taxpayer, and just by not resting on our laurels and trying to apply what we've learned to existing problems.
Honorable philosophy. Thank you, sir. Ev?
I think like what Colin said, you know, like I think that there's a lot of potential to do things in public service. I'm also relatively new to the public service. I've been here for 3 years. It was really kind of my first avenue after university. And I would also just add that I've been really lucky to work with people who've kind of really fostered creativity and who have been really okay with just asking questions. And I really just like, I had the idea and I was like, this would be like really cool. And someone said, yeah, you want to do it? Like, okay. And then it just kind of spiraled that way. And so that's really cool. And it comes back to the idea that like, nobody is going to action something for you. Like you have to go roll out your own project. And it's also like a really cool way. I think that people here are so passionate, and you might find things that are outside of your day to day that really kind of get you going and get you really fired up. And to get it done, like you just kind of do it, and maybe one time it turns into like, maybe sometimes it turns into something bigger, but really like you just kind of keep pushing it that way. And I think it really comes back to just doing something to make something better, you know, like for other people, or like you see something and you want to fix it, and so you kind of do.
Nice. Joanna, Etienne?
You know, honestly, I was sitting there moving to my job at the Canada School of Public Service had started. I was on my desk. It's like, oh, hey, can you please send us your transcript? I'm like, really? Come on, people. And then went to a whiteboard with my then DG and just started looking into it. And, that was almost 3 years ago. So ideas are great. Implementation is hard. I pushed this, it felt a little bit like a snowball up a hill. And now it's at the top of the hill and it's picking up some steam and some more, it's rolling around because the timing is right. So if you have an idea, think about how to implement it, find the right people, keep talking about it because you never know when it's going to catch on. We've done so much work and advancements in the last 3 years, and now people seem to be ready. Maybe they weren't ready 3 years ago, maybe now they're ready. So don't give up. Value for public funds, again, like Colin mentioned, and let's just do it. I just friggin' love being a public servant, so anything that I can do to help others, let's do it.
Merci.
Et puis pour moi, c'est de monter la barre dans la prise de décision. Puis comme je l'ai mentionné, le guesswork and gut feelings, j'ai plus de patience avec ça en RH. L'absence de données fait en sorte que ce qui domine les décisions, c'est l'opinion de la personne qui a le plus de pouvoir autour de la table. C'est ça. Et donc les données peuvent, they can level the playing field. Puis c'est ce que je souhaite qui va arriver.
Colin, go ahead.
Oh, just yeah. I just want to say I agree with Ioana. If you, in my experience, and I've been in talks for sometimes years over a new project or new innovation that didn't go anywhere. Like a year plus, it's not uncommon. So my approach nowadays is if I can prototype it rapidly, an 80% solution. You've probably heard of Pareto principle. Tim Ferriss. Anyone who's read Tim Ferriss, he's big on that. But the idea is a rapid prototype, and the 2 projects that I demonstrated, the learning took a long time, learning the natural language processing and learning the AI, but the actual implementation, I did those things in a day. So, I mean, you can rapidly, once you've built up, a background knowledge in a field, you can spend maybe a day, a few days, but you could spend a few days, a week to demonstrate a working prototype and get buy-in. Rather than spending years trying to polish it to 100%. But as I said, talk I find is cheap, and people can talk for years but not do anything. So sometimes the best bet, in my opinion, is to just, if you can do it, rapidly prototype a solution, an 80% solution, and go from there. Because once people see it, I find skeptics are often turned into your biggest backers.
Et je suis entièrement d'accord avec ce que Colin vient de dire, et je rajouterais que pour de toute la présentation que j'ai faite, toutes les analyses de données qui sont allées dans la présentation ont pris moins de 6 ou 7 jours de travail d'analyse, mais de convaincre le leadership de faire ce travail-là, d'obtenir les accords pour aller chercher les données, là, ça a pris des mois, mais l'analyse en soi, générer les insights, produire les diagrammes, a maximum 10 jours de travail, maximum.
Effectivement. Il y a des choses qu'on peut faire rapidement, mais comme Johanna a dit, c'est important aussi de tenir son bout du bâton puis de continuer à persévérer parce qu'on ne sait jamais quand l'alignement des astres va faire en sorte que ça va être l'idée du siècle, and then we'll be ready. Donc, merci beaucoup à tous pour votre contribution aujourd'hui. Il y a énormément de questions dans Slido auxquelles on n'a pas eu le temps de répondre, donc on va les compiler, les faire circuler et on va les publier dans GC Collab. Presenters, thank you so much for your generous contributions, your time, your wonderful insights. Lovely to have you. Thank you. Audience, this was our last session for 2021. We will see you in 2022 as of January. So stay safe, everyone. À la prochaine. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.